The crimson glow of distant stars reflected off the polished hull of the Vorthon flagship as Admiral Zarthek stood before the massive tactical display. 3,000 years of galactic dominance had taught the Vorthon Empire one crucial lesson. War was mathematics, and mathematics never lied. Every battle followed the same elegant formula: maintain maximum distance, deploy overwhelming firepower, execute with surgical precision. The holographic display showed the recent carnage at Kepler 442, where human colonial forces had made their final stand. Zarthek's 6 eyes studied the battlefield recordings with cold satisfaction. The human ships had fought desperately, their crude vessels charging straight into Vorthon firing lines like moths into plasma flames. Their weapons were laughably primitive, metal projectiles fired from chemical propulsion systems that belonged in a museum. "Look at this footage." Zarthek clicked his mandibles in amusement, addressing the War Council gathered around him. The replay showed a human destroyer, the UCS Defiance, ramming itself into a Vorthon cruiser after its weapons failed. Both ships had exploded in a brilliant fireball that lit up the asteroid field for several minutes. "Suicide tactics," commented General Vormix, his scales shifting from blue to contemptuous purple. "They sacrifice entire crews for minimal tactical advantage. No wonder they've lost every major engagement." The Vorthon military doctrine had been perfected over millennia of conquest. Their dreadnoughts were technological marvels, sleek silver vessels 3 kilometers long, bristling with energy weapons that could vaporize mountains. Each ship was identical, mass-produced in orbital factories, crewed by soldiers who had trained for decades in simulation chambers. When 500 of these magnificent warships moved together, they created a formation so precise it looked like a single living entity. Captain Lee Min-ho's desperate transmission from the dying colony ship had reached Vorthon intelligence just hours before his vessel was destroyed. The recording showed a bloodied human officer shouting warnings about something he called human unpredictability. He claimed that human forces didn't follow standard tactical doctrines, that they adapted and improvised in ways that made them dangerous despite their technological inferiority. Emotional breakdown, dismissed Intelligence Director Kexara, her tentacles writhing with disdain. "Defeated species always claim their enemies don't understand them. It's a psychological defense mechanism we've observed in 47 previous campaigns." The War Council chamber itself was a testament to Vorthon's superiority. Crystalline walls displayed real-time data from across the galaxy, showing the precise locations of every ship in their vast fleet. Mathematical equations floated in holographic displays, calculating optimal firing solutions, supply line efficiency and casualty projections. Everything was ordered, everything was planned, everything was perfect. Zarthek manipulated the tactical display with practiced ease, showing the assembled fleet now massing at the edge of the Sol system. 500 identical dreadnoughts hung in space like a geometric constellation, their formation so precise that the distance between each vessel was calculated to the centimeter. Supporting them were 2,000 smaller vessels, cruisers, destroyers, and support ships, all following the same design principles of efficiency and uniformity. Earth's pathetic defense fleet was already visible on long-range sensors. 43. Mismatched vessels of various sizes and configurations, many clearly modified civilian ships pressed into military service. Their formations were chaotic, their patrol patterns unpredictable. Some ships appeared to be moving randomly, as if their crews had no understanding of proper tactical deployment. "Intelligence estimates Earth will surrender within 6 hours of our arrival," reported strategic analyst Nix Von, his crystalline features glowing with confidence. "Their industrial capacity cannot replace losses. Their population lacks military discipline, and their technology is centuries behind ours." The analysis seemed foolproof. Human ships relied on primitive fusion reactors, while Vorthon vessels drew power from contained singularities. Human weapons fired physical projectiles, while Vorthon energy beams traveled at light speed. Human armor was crude metal alloys, while Vorthon hulls incorporated self-repairing smart materials that could adapt to different forms of attack. Yet something nagged at Zarthek's military mind. In 43 conquest campaigns, No species had ever fought with such seemingly irrational tactics. Most civilizations, when faced with Vorthan technological superiority, either surrendered immediately or fought according to standard military doctrine before accepting inevitable defeat. Humans seemed to do neither. The recordings from Kepler 442 showed human crews continuing to fight even after their ships were crippled. One destroyer had lost its entire bridge, but kept firing using manual gun controls operated from engineering sections. A damaged cruiser had used its dying reactor as a weapon, deliberately overloading it near a cluster of Vorthan vessels. "Madness," muttered Communications Officer Zelik. "They fight like wild animals instead of civilized beings." But Admiral Zarthek had not maintained his position for 2 centuries by dismissing unusual behavior. Something about human warfare. Patterns troubled him, though he couldn't identify exactly what. Their tactics seemed random, yet they had managed to inflict casualties that exceeded statistical projections. Their ships appeared poorly designed, yet they had survived longer than any previous enemy. The final assault order had already been transmitted. The Vorthan fleet would advance in perfect formation, deploy their overwhelming firepower at maximum range, and systematically destroy Earth's defenses. Mathematical models predicted total victory within 18 hours, with acceptable losses of less than 2%. As the War Council dispersed to prepare for battle, Zarthek remained alone with the tactical displays. The perfectly ordered formation of his fleet glowed reassuringly in the darkness of space, ready to add another conquest to the Vorthan Empire's glorious history. The asteroid belt around Sol system stretched endlessly in all directions, a graveyard of ancient rock and ice that had witnessed the birth of planets billions of years ago. Now it would witness something far more dramatic. The Vorthan fleet moved through this cosmic debris field like a silver river of death, their perfect formation undisturbed by the floating mountains of stone around them. Sensor Officer Kyles monitored the tactical displays aboard the flagship, her compound eyes tracking hundreds of data streams simultaneously. The advance had proceeded exactly according to schedule for the past 6 hours. Earth's pathetic defense fleet remained clustered around their homeworld, apparently waiting for the inevitable slaughter. Then the impossible happened. "Admiral," Kyles called out, her voice betraying the first hint of confusion anyone had heard from a Vorthan officer in centuries. "I'm detecting a single vessel approaching from the outer system. Vector suggests it originated from beyond Pluto's orbit." "Admiral." Zarthek's mandibles clicked irritably. "Probably a fleeing transport. Lock weapons and vaporize it." "Sir, the vessel is not fleeing. It's approaching our formation at high velocity." The tactical display shifted to show the anomaly. What appeared on screen made several Vorthan officers emit shocked hissing sounds. The approaching vessel looked like something that had crawled out of a shipyard's nightmare. Its hull was a patchwork of different metal types, some sections gleaming with military-grade armor plating, while others appeared to be civilian hull fragments welded together with crude fusion torches. The ship's basic shape defied every principle of efficient spacecraft design. Where Vorthan vessels were sleek and symmetrical, this monstrosity bulged in random directions. Weapon turrets of varying sizes and designs jutted from its surface like metallic growths, none of them matching the others. Some appeared to be military-grade. Railguns, others looked like mining lasers adapted for combat, and several were completely unidentifiable. "By the void," whispered Navigation Officer Texmore. "What manner of vessel is that?" Captain Park Ji-won stood on the bridge of the UES Revenge, his weathered face reflecting years of loss and determination. Around him, his crew worked at control stations that had been salvaged from a dozen different ship classes. Nothing matched. Nothing was standard, but everything worked. They had made sure of that during the 3 months it had taken to build this impossible vessel. The main view screen showed the Vorthan armada ahead, 500 identical silver spears hanging in space like a wall of death. Park had seen similar formations destroy the colonies at Kepler 442, where his wife and daughter had died aboard an evacuation transport. He had watched recordings of the massacre at Centauri Prime, where his brother's mining crew had been vaporized, trying to defend their orbital station. "Status report," Park commanded, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. Chief Engineer Lee Tae-min looked up from his jury-rigged console. The man had somehow managed to connect power systems from 4 different ship classes into a single functioning engine assembly. All reactors are running hot, Captain. The hull modifications are holding, and our surprise packages are ready for deployment. Weapons Officer Kim Da-eun checked her displays. Main batteries are charged. We've got everything from plasma cannons to old-fashioned nuclear torpedoes. None of it's pretty, but it'll hurt. The Revenge had been built from the wreckage of 12 destroyed vessels, each one representing families, friends, and comrades lost to Vorthon aggression. The cruiser Determination's engine core powered their main drives. The destroyer, Courage's weapon systems, had been integrated into their forward batteries. Civilian transports had provided additional hull plating, their cargo holds converted into armor segments. But the ship's greatest strength wasn't its weapons or armor. It was its crew. 68 survivors from various battles, each one having lost everything to the Vorthon advance. They weren't soldiers following orders anymore. They were something far more dangerous. Humans with absolutely nothing left to lose. The Vorthon transmission crackled through the bridge speakers. Admiral Zarthek's alien voice dripping with condescension. Unknown human vessel, you are vastly outnumbered and technologically inferior. Surrender immediately, and we will grant you a swift death rather than the prolonged agony your resistance will bring. Park Ji-won looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. He saw engineer Choi Soo-jin, whose family had died in the orbital bombardment of New Seoul. Communications officer Yoon Hae-jin, who had watched his homeworld burn from the bridge of an evacuation ship. Medical officer Song Ye-rin, who had treated thousands of wounded refugees only to watch most of them die anyway. Gentlemen and ladies, Park said quietly, we came here to send a message. I believe it's time to deliver it. He opened a channel to the Vorthon flagship, his response simple and direct. This is Captain Park Ji-won of the United Earth ship Revenge. We decline your offer. The weapons lock was his real answer. Every gun on the Revenge trained on the Vorthon flagship, targeting systems painting the alien vessel with dozens of firing solutions. The message was clear. They weren't running, they weren't surrendering, and they definitely weren't afraid. The Vorthon tactical displays erupted in confusion as the human vessel accelerated directly toward their center formation. This violated every principle of civilized warfare. Standard tactical doctrine demanded that smaller forces attempt to retreat or maneuver for advantageous positioning. No sane commander would charge a single ship directly into the heart of an enemy fleet. Impossible, muttered Admiral Zarthek. They're committing suicide. But Captain Park Ji-won had learned something during the months of building the Revenge from wreckage and grief. Sometimes the most logical tactical choice was to abandon logic entirely. Sometimes the best strategy was to do something so crazy that your enemy couldn't predict it. All hands, Park announced over the ship's internal communication system, his voice carrying to every corner of the vessel. Prepare for ramming speed. Today we show these aliens what happens when they threaten humanity's children. The Revenge's engines roared to full power, hurling the makeshift battleship directly toward the heart of the Vorthon formation, like a missile made of metal, fury, and unstoppable human determination. The moment of impact came with the sound of 10,000 thunderclaps echoing through space. The Revenge struck the first Vorthon cruiser at ramming speed, its reinforced prow, built from the armored hull of a destroyed mining vessel, punching through the alien ship's elegant energy barriers like they were made of soap bubbles. The cruiser's sleek silver hull crumpled inward, its beautiful geometric design collapsing into twisted metal as the human battleship carved through it. Aboard the Vorthon flagship, Admiral Zarthek watched in stunned silence as his perfect formation began to dissolve into chaos. The tactical displays showed something that shouldn't have been possible. A single enemy vessel moving through his fleet like a wild animal, destroying everything in its path. "Damage report," he commanded, his voice cracking for the first time. In 2 centuries of military service, the forward cruiser Elegant Death is completely destroyed, reported Sensor Officer Kailes, her compound eyes wide with disbelief. The human vessel has suffered minimal damage and is continuing its attack run. The Revenge burst through the debris cloud of its first victim, chunks of alien metal bouncing off its armored hull like raindrops. Captain Park Ji-won gripped the command chair as his ship shuddered from the impact, but the patchwork vessel held together. 3 months of desperate engineering work had paid off. The reinforcing beams salvaged from cargo haulers were doing their job. All weapons, fire at will, Commander Kim Da-eun shouted over the noise of groaning metal and screaming engines. Her jury-rigged weapon systems came alive with deadly purpose. The Revenge's main battery consisted of mining railguns that had been designed to break apart asteroids. Now they found a different target. The magnetic accelerators launched tungsten projectiles at incredible velocity, each shot carrying the kinetic energy of a small nuclear weapon. The Vorthan ships had never faced anything like it. Energy shields that could deflect laser beams and plasma bolts were useless against solid metal traveling at 30,000 kilometers per second. The first railgun shot punched through a Vorthan destroyer's shield generator and continued straight through the ship's engine core. The alien vessel exploded in a brilliant fireball that lit up the asteroid belt. "Impossible," Admiral Zarthek hissed, watching his tactical displays show red damage indicators spreading across his fleet. "Their weapons are primitive kinetic devices. Our shield should stop them easily." But Vorthan military doctrine had been developed, fighting other civilized species who used civilized weapons. Energy beams, guided missiles, plasma torpedoes. All the elegant tools of advanced warfare. No one had prepared them for humans who strapped mining equipment to warships and used them, like clubs. The Revenge continued its rampage through the alien formation. Captain Park had thrown away every rule of space combat and replaced them with something far more dangerous, pure human instinct. When 2 Vorthan frigates moved to flank him, he didn't try elegant evasive maneuvers. Instead, he grabbed a floating chunk of debris with his ship's magnetic grappling system and hurled it at one of them like a stone from a slingshot. The improvised projectile, a piece of destroyed Vorthan, hull plating, struck the frigate's bridge section at high velocity. The alien crew had no time to react before their command center was crushed, leaving their ship drifting helplessly through space. "They're using debris as weapons," Communications Officer Zelik reported in panic. "They're turning our own destroyed ships against us." Chief Engineer Lee Tae-min worked frantically at his control station as the Revenge took its first serious hit. A Vorthan energy beam had found a weak spot in their armor, burning through 3 layers of hull plating and destroying the port weapons array. Warning lights flashed red across the bridge, and the smell of burning electronics filled the air. "Port batteries are offline," he reported. "We've lost 30% of our firepower." But Captain Park just smiled grimly. "Then we'll use what we have left. Roll the ship 15 degrees starboard and bring the main guns to bear." The Revenge twisted in space like a fighting animal, presenting its undamaged side to the enemy. The starboard weapons array unleashed another devastating volley, nuclear-tipped missiles streaking toward a cluster of Vorthan vessels. The aliens tried to intercept them with point defense systems, but human missiles were crude and unpredictable. They didn't follow neat flight paths that could be easily calculated. One missile detonated prematurely, its nuclear warhead creating an electromagnetic pulse that disabled a nearby Vorthan cruiser's electronics. Another missile missed its target completely but struck an asteroid, sending a shower of high-velocity rock fragments into the alien formation. The third missile found its mark, vaporizing a destroyer in a miniature sun. Medical Officer Song Yerin rushed through the ship's corridors, treating wounded crew members who refused to leave their posts. The Revenge had taken damage, but its crew seemed to feed on the violence, like it was fuel for their souls. Every hit they took made them fight harder. Every system failure became an opportunity for improvisation. When the ship's main communications array was destroyed by enemy fire, Communications Officer Yoon Hae-jin rerouted signals through the navigation sensors. When the armor plating was breached in 3 places, the escaping atmosphere was vented strategically to blind enemy targeting systems with clouds of freezing gas. Admiral Zarthek watched his perfect formation crumble into scattered groups of confused vessels. His ships were designed for elegant long-range combat, not the brutal close-quarters brawl that the humans had forced upon them. Vorthan crews trained for years to execute precise maneuvers in perfect coordination, but chaos was the human element they had never encountered. "They're not following any tactical doctrine," he screamed at his bewildered staff. "They're making up new forms of warfare as they fight." The Revenge carved another path of destruction through the alien fleet, its scarred hull glowing red-hot from weapons impacts. But Captain Park Ji-won wasn't done yet. He had learned something during the months of building his ship from wreckage and anger. Sometimes the best weapon wasn't what you carried, but what you were willing to become. The human battleship moved through space like a living thing, adapting to every challenge, turning every wound into a weapon. And for the first time in 3,000 years of conquest, the Vorthon Empire began to understand that they had encountered something beyond their comprehension. They had met humanity at war, and humanity was magnificent and terrible to behold. Battle had been raging for 3 hours when the Vorthon fleet attempted their first coordinated response. Admiral Zarthek watched his tactical display as 47 remaining vessels moved to encircle the human battleship, their formation designed to create an inescapable trap. The mathematical precision was perfect, every angle calculated, every firing solution optimized. But humans had never been good at mathematics when it came to survival. Engineering Chief Choi Soo-jin watched the enemy ships closing in through her jury-rigged sensor display. The Revenge's main reactor was running at dangerous levels, its fusion core pushed far beyond safety limits. Steam vented from damaged coolant lines, and the air tasted of ozone and burning metal. But Soo-jin had an idea that would have horrified any reasonable engineer. "Captain," she called over the ship's internal communication system, "I can overload the secondary reactor to create an electromagnetic pulse. It'll fry every electronic system within 5 kilometers, including ours, Captain." Park Ji-won didn't hesitate. "Do it." Soo-jin's hands flew over her controls, rerouting power conduits and disabling safety systems that had been installed to prevent exactly what she was about to do. The secondary reactor began to whine with increasing intensity, its magnetic containment field fluctuating wildly. Warning alarms screamed throughout the ship as radiation levels spiked. "EMP in 10 seconds, Soo-jin announced. The pulse erupted from the Revenge like an invisible explosion, washing over the surrounding Vorthon vessels in a wave of destructive energy. Alien ships that had been closing in for the kill suddenly went dark, their sophisticated electronics fried by the electromagnetic surge. 7 Vorthon vessels drifted helplessly, their crews frantically trying to restart systems that had never been designed to handle such brutal treatment. But the Revenge had paid a price too. Half their systems were offline, the ship's lights flickering as backup power struggled to maintain basic functions. Yet the human crew adapted instantly. Navigation Officer Kim Tae-ho switched to manual controls, using visual references and basic mathematics to plot their course. Weapons Officer Han Bora activated the old-fashioned mechanical targeting systems that had been installed as backups. "We're flying blind, but so are they," Captain Park announced, "and we've been flying blind since this war started." The Vorthon. Response came 20 minutes later. A coordinated long-range bombardment from ships positioned outside the EMP's effective range. Energy beams lanced through space, forcing the Revenge to dance between deadly light streams that could vaporize mountains. The human ship twisted and rolled, its damaged hull groaning under the stress of high-speed maneuvers. Weapons Officer Han Bo-ra had an inspiration born from desperation. The Revenge's gravity drive, originally designed for interstellar travel, could be used for more than just propulsion. She began a complex series of calculations, using gravitational fields to bend the ship's flight path in ways that defied conventional physics. "Hold on, everyone," she announced. "We're going to try something stupid." The Revenge suddenly accelerated toward a massive asteroid, its trajectory suggesting that Captain Park had finally lost his mind. The Vorthon ships adjusted their aim, preparing to finish off the human vessel as it crashed into solid rock. But at the last second, Han Bo-ra activated the gravity drive at full power. The ship whipped around the asteroid like a stone from a sling, using the gravitational acceleration to achieve impossible velocity. The Revenge shot out from behind the rock at nearly 10% of light speed, appearing behind the alien bombardment formation before their sensors could track the maneuver. Point-blank range had never been so deadly. The human weapons arrays opened fire at distances, measured in hundreds of meters rather than thousands of kilometers. Railgun shots punched through alien hulls before the Vorthan crews could react. Nuclear torpedoes detonated against energy shields that had been designed for long-range combat, not close-quarters brawling. 3 Vorthan cruisers exploded in rapid succession, their debris fields creating a deadly maze of spinning metal fragments. But the Revenge had taken damage too. A direct hit from an energy cannon had blown a hole the size of a shuttle bay through the ship's port side. Lieutenant Yoon Hae-jin led his damage control team into the breach, while weapons fire still raged around them. The young officer had trained as a communications specialist, but war had made him into something more versatile. His team worked frantically to seal the hull breach using emergency foam and metal patches salvaged from destroyed alien vessels. "We're losing atmosphere on decks 7 through 12, he reported, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. But the main structural supports are holding. Medical Officer Song Ye-rin moved through the ship like a guardian angel, treating wounded crew members who refused to abandon their posts. She found Gunner Lee Min-seo unconscious at his station, blood streaming from a head wound caused by flying debris. When he regained consciousness, the first words out of his mouth were, "Are the guns still working?" "They're working," Song assured him, helping him back to his feet. "Keep them that way." The Vorthan fleet had lost 37 vessels in 4 hours of combat, but they still outnumbered the humans by more than 10 to 1. Admiral Zarthek ordered a tactical withdrawal to regroup and analyze their enemy's fighting patterns. But analysis was impossible when the enemy kept changing the rules. "Sir," reported Intelligence Officer Kexara, her tentacles writhing with confusion, "their tactical responses don't match any known military doctrine. They appear to be inventing new strategies during active combat." The Revenge had become something beyond a warship. Half its systems were destroyed. Its hull was breached in dozens of places, and its crew was running on pure adrenaline and determination. But every wound had been turned into an advantage. Destroyed armor plating had been replaced with salvaged alien hull fragments. Damaged weapons had been jury-rigged into new configurations. Even the hull breaches had been weaponized, venting atmosphere to create blinding clouds that confused enemy sensors. Captain Park stood on his bridge, watching the Vorthan fleet regrouping in the distance. His ship looked like it had been through a meat grinder, but it was still fighting. More importantly, his crew was still fighting. They had discovered something that no military academy could teach, that the most dangerous weapon in any war was the refusal to accept defeat. "Status report," Park requested. Chief Engineer Lee Tae-min looked up from his improvised control station. "We've lost 60% of our systems, Captain, but the remaining 40% is working better than ever." The Revenge drifted through the debris field of destroyed alien vessels, more wreckage than ship but still deadly. It had become a living symbol of human warfare, chaotic, unpredictable, and absolutely unstoppable. The Vorthan Empire was learning a lesson that would reshape their understanding of war itself. Sometimes the most advanced tactics were useless against an enemy who refused to follow any tactics at all. The Revenge had been fighting for 7 hours. When Captain Park Ji-won realized they were out of options, his ship was falling apart around him. Hull breaches on every deck, fires burning in 3 different sections, and only 2 working weapons arrays left. The bridge itself looked like a war zone, with sparking consoles and emergency lighting casting eerie shadows across the faces of his exhausted crew. Chief Engineer Lee Tae-min's latest damage report painted a grim picture. "Captain, we've lost main propulsion. Our armor is down to 15% and the reactor core is showing critical instability warnings. We've got maybe 20 minutes before complete system failure." Through the main view screen, Park could see the Vorthan fleet regrouping for what would certainly be their final assault. 312 alien vessels remained, their silver, hulls gleaming like predatory fish in the starlight. They had learned to respect the human battleship's deadly unpredictability, but numbers were numbers, and the Revenge was clearly dying. Admiral Zarthek stood aboard his flagship, watching the crippled human vessel drift through the debris field it had created. 7 hours of impossible combat had cost him nearly 200 ships and thousands of crew members. His perfect formations lay in ruins, his tactical doctrine shattered by an enemy that refused to follow any rules of civilized warfare. "Sir," reported Tactical Officer Velkash, "the human vessel appears to be venting atmosphere from multiple hull breaches. Their energy signature is declining rapidly. They cannot survive another coordinated assault." Yet something about the human ship's movements troubled Zarthek. Even crippled and dying, it continued to maneuver with purpose. The Revenge was positioning itself between the Vortan fleet and a large asteroid cluster, as if preparing for one. Final desperate stand. Aboard the human battleship, Captain Park made his decision. He looked around the bridge at the faces of his crew, men and women who had followed him into hell itself and somehow managed to fight their way through it. They were exhausted, wounded, and running on pure determination, but not one of them had asked to surrender. "Listen up, everyone," Park said quietly, his voice carrying to every corner of the ship through the internal communication system. "We came here to send a message to these aliens, to show them that humanity doesn't bow down to bullies, no matter how advanced their technology might be." Engineering Chief Choi Soo-jin looked up from her jury-rigged control station. "Captain, if we're going to make one last run, I can overload both reactor cores simultaneously. It'll give us enough power for a full-speed ramming attack, but the explosion will vaporize everything within 50 kilometers. Medical Officer Song Ye-rin moved through the bridge, checking on wounded crew members who had refused to leave their posts. "Captain, we've got 37 crew members in critical condition, but they're all still at their stations. No one wants to miss the finale." Park nodded slowly. He had known this moment would come when they built the Revenge from salvaged wreckage and burning anger. They had always been on a suicide mission. The only question was how much damage they could inflict before the end. "All hands prepare for ramming speed," Park announced. "Target is the enemy flagship. We're going to show these aliens what happens when they threaten Earth." The Revenge's engines roared to life one final time. Fusion reactors pushed far beyond their design limits by Chief Engineer Lee Tae-min's desperate modifications. The battleship accelerated toward the center of the Vortan formation. Its damaged hull trailing debris and venting plasma like a comet made of human determination. Admiral Zarthek watched in growing horror as the human vessel approached his flagship on a direct collision course. "All ships, concentrate fire on the approaching vessel. Destroy it before it reaches us." Energy beams lanced out from dozens of Vortan ships, striking the Revenge's hull and armor plating. But the human battleship had been designed to absorb punishment, and Captain Park had learned to use damage as a weapon. Each hit that penetrated their armor created new vents for atmosphere and coolant, creating a blinding cloud around the ship that made targeting almost impossible. Weapons Officer Han Bo-ra fired the Revenge's last nuclear torpedoes in a spread pattern, not aiming for specific targets but simply creating as much chaos as possible in the enemy formation. The warheads detonated among the Vortan ships, their electromagnetic pulses disrupting alien electronics and forcing several vessels to break formation. "Impact in 30 seconds, Navigation Officer Kim Tae-ho announced, his hands steady on the manual flight controls, despite the violent shaking as enemy weapons continued to strike their hull. Captain Park activated the ship's final recording system, knowing that someone needed to witness what they had accomplished here. "This is Captain Park Ji-won of the United Earth ship Revenge. If anyone finds this log, know that we came here not to win a war, but to prove that humanity will never surrender to tyranny. We showed these aliens that advanced technology means nothing against the human spirit. The collision came with the force of a miniature star being born. The Revenge struck the Vortan flagship at 17% of light speed, its reinforced prow punching through alien armor plating like it was made of paper. Both ships exploded simultaneously, their combined mass converting to pure energy in a brilliant flash that could be seen from Earth itself. The explosion created a shockwave that swept through both fleets, destroying dozens of nearby vessels, and sending the survivors tumbling through space like leaves in a hurricane. When the light finally faded, a new nebula hung in space where two proud warships had died together. The surviving Vortan commanders found themselves facing a terrible realization. A single human vessel had destroyed nearly half their invasion fleet and shattered 3,000 years of military doctrine. The humans hadn't won through superior technology or brilliant strategy. They had won through sheer, unstoppable determination. Fleet Commander Jexitai, now the senior surviving officer, made a decision that would have been unthinkable 7 hours earlier. All ships withdraw to minimum safe distance. Prepare a communication to Earth Command. The message that reached Earth 3 days later changed the course of galactic history. To the leaders of humanity, it began, "We are the Vorthon Empire, and we offer terms of peace. Your species has taught us that warfare is not merely about calculations and superior firepower. It is about the will to fight when all seems lost, the refusal to surrender in the face of impossible odds, and the ability to turn any situation into a weapon. We came to conquer your world, but instead, you have conquered our understanding. We wish to learn from you, not destroy you. Perhaps, together we can bring this new form of warfare, this human art of never giving up, to the galaxy's countless conflicts." When salvage teams finally reached the wreckage of the Revenge weeks later, they found Captain Park's final log entry intact in the ship's armored data core. His last words became a rallying cry that would echo across human space for generations. They wanted to understand human warfare. "We showed them it's not about having the best ships or the strongest weapons. It's about never surrendering, never giving up, and turning every disadvantage into a weapon. That's what makes us human." The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had taken its first step toward becoming not just another species among the stars, but teachers of the most important lesson in the universe, that the greatest weapon any being can possess is the refusal to accept defeat. The end.